Hi, I'm Ryan.
Hey, I'm Jess, and this is your therapist is not okay.
On today's episode, we're going to talk about a hot topic.
Oh, yeah, hot topic.
We're going to talk about what we really think about AI and how it might impact the mental health realm.
Before we dive into this podcast, we just want to give a heartfelt thanks to everyone who's liked and subscribed to our podcast. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. We'll be able to reach more listeners that way and start to make the impact we want about being able to break the stigma on mental health.
Thank you all so much for listening. And also keep in mind that you're welcome to ask us any questions that you might have through our Instagram or through comments on any of the platforms that you listen on.
Everything seems like it's hit, like AI is everywhere, from like different ways we can write letters to like how we're navigating different diagnoses to even just thinking about this aspect of a lot of the movies we once saw in the 2010s is now coming to fruition and just how we're kind of living our day-to-day lives.
Absolutely. It's kind of a fascinating topic that is touching everything, as you say, and there's kind of been a lot of buzz about it. I've certainly been hearing about it a lot from friends and family. Sometimes it shows up in the therapy office as well.
Hmm.
Jess, I'm wondering, what have you been hearing about AI, in particular therapy and AI?
Just feels like it's the kind of thing where I sometimes feel a little bit out of the like loop because I'm a bit of a Luddite, if you don't know that about me. So I like never am on the trends. Like some of my deepest and dearest friends, including you, Ryan, make fun of me for like how sometimes out of the loop I am. And then years later, I'm like, oh my gosh, this amazing technology. Like, oh gosh, Jess. But in 2017, that was the very first time this conversation kind of came to me. And usually because I'm a psychotherapist, the conversation usually goes around like, do you think AI can take your job as a therapist? And so it's not just about like writing letters, at least that's not like what I've been hearing when it comes to like just like a conversation. It's like with things like BetterHelp or Inkblot, like there's so many different platforms and a lot of them do texting. What, like, how hard would it be to have a bot do that texting for like clients that could have that 24-hour care? Or thinking about algorithms, like how many like kind of better questions could there be? And just recently a client said like just like you could have so many other kind of like minds attached to the work you're doing that could actually maybe impact your work in a better way. And so it kind of has these two things, Ryan, where it's like either like, am I nervous it's going to take the job that I do? Because you're going to have a robot that probably is going to be pretty personable, will be able to ask pretty on point questions, will be ready 24/7. Um, like, will that make my job kind of a moot point? And it's something I really wanted to consider, like, especially thinking about everything that's happening. Or is it something that can actually make my job so much more enhanced because I can have AI at my fingertips? Um, to be fair, right now, I think that AI is kind of at its infancy. I saw a letter recently come through my office from a supervisee that was so badly written that it felt actually like it would almost have been easier just to rewrite this like clinical letter for a client than try to edit what the AI came up with. It just was not the kind of professional and like informal tone that we often go for as psychotherapists to have our expertise ring true. But I think that like if I didn't take this kind of topic seriously or even just like allow myself to actually really answer this question without being defensive and being like, of course it's not. I think that it's really important for me to kind of have my finger on the pulse of like, how do I feel? And not just be reactive, I suppose. So that's kind of what I've been hearing. What have you been hearing?
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's kind of interesting. I think I've been encountering a lot of kind of similar thoughts from people maybe suggesting like, are you using this? If not, why aren't you using this? It could definitely make your job a lot easier.
Mm.
I guess some experiences I've had recently that kind of stand out were I was talking to a friend who was traveling to a couple places that I've been to,
Okay.
and he asked like, what are your travel recommendations for these places? So I was like, jogging my memory and giving some suggestions. I like, oh, these were some of my favorite sites, like definitely go to this restaurant, etc. And he said, yeah, AI already said all of that. So I guess he had
Oh,
asked AI, plan a trip in this
yeah.
location. And I was like, okay. And first of all, I'm a very sensitive soul. So I was deeply hurt by this. I was like, so why did you even ask me if you want AI to plan your trip anyway?
Yeah.
Um, but I think that also kind of touches on this. Can AI do what I do, whether that's professionally or in a capacity as a friend? Which then kind of connects to something I recently heard from someone who consults with me,
Mm.
saying like they have a client whose best friend is an AI.
Hmm.
And, kind of that therapist feeling quite concerned and confused about like, well, how do I navigate this? Because it is clear that they feel maybe less isolated and alone having this. And yet it also means that they're not practicing the necessary skills to build relationships outside of the virtual.
It's an interesting thing because if we think about like the early 2000s, having gaming communities where you were like connected with people around the world would make it seem like you have no friends. But you did, and you were connecting with people, and those were real people around the world. You just couldn't see them. I have this feeling that AI is going to be very much like old technologies that we may have kind of scoffed at. Before, dating platforms and like finding someone online was actually something embarrassing. I remember people like not wanting to share that, and now it's such a common thing. And I think maybe having partners or friendships that are in AI might seem really kind of weird now and might not later. Like, I think this is one of those kinds of technologies that aren't going away, is only going to get more sophisticated, and probably is going to be a part of everyone's day-to-day lives. So it's actually a really important topic, not to just kind of scoff, even though I'm scared in some ways of like what it's going to do because there's so much unknown.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also that kind of thing of like, it is going to be there, and maybe you can have a real relationship. Have you ever seen that movie, Her, Her?
I haven't actually seen it.
You should watch it. It's actually an interesting take because it's not like the technology tries to take over the world like so many of like the movies we have. It's really just about how people have a relationship with technology. And what's interesting is like in the movie, everyone's very gregarious and dancing in the street, but at the same time, they're all separated from one another. So they're
Mm.
dancing or giggling or having these stories because they have these earbuds of an AI they're having a relationship with. It's very interesting.
Mm. But none of them are feeling isolated, which kind of is like, that's the question of like, is there anything wrong with that then? Um, I've also been hearing a lot about AI in the creative space,
Oh,
which
okay.
is kind of like just adjacent to us. Like I definitely think of therapy as kind of an art form that we practice.
Hmm.
It's not something that we apply like from a rule book or a list of like this is what you do if someone says they've got depression or something, right? It's very responsive to the individual. And I've heard a lot of concern and fear from artists feeling like, well, if you can tell AI create a painting of this in the style of this artist or this type of art style, then it can do that to varying degrees of success depending on what platform you're using.
Hmm.
So it does also run this possibility of much more quickly replacing some jobs than ours.
Well, I think that that's kind of it because we get this kind of knee-jerk reaction, be like, it can't take our job. But let's take it seriously. If like I were to ask you like what the benefits of using AI would be,
Mm.
what would you say? Like if we didn't just say this is a scary technology, what would we say the good things about it are?
Yeah, no, that's a good point because I think there's a lot of potential benefits. There's a reason it's being funded and explored as much as it is. Um, One of the reasons being there's big profit motivations that are kind of lurking in there. But
That is not a benefit.
no, but it's the reason it's getting funding.
Okay.
It's not a benefit. It's true. Sorry, I'll reorient to some of the benefits because there are some that I have thought about and encountered for how AI can be helpful to therapists specifically.
Okay.
And some of those are that the technology has a better memory than us. I have a terrible memory, in basically every possible way. It's better, when I'm in a session with a client, then I remember things that I wouldn't remember, when I'm not with the client. But technology doesn't have those memory gaps in the same way. So it can track what you're saying very well.
Mm.
And for actually that reason, it can be really helpful for note keeping. And I know a lot of therapists that will use AI to help them keep notes. Some people would do have an AI that does like a little bit of a summary of what happened in the session from
Mm.
what it observed in the session. I think that there are some therapy online platforms that offer that. Um, or also just saying like, write a note in this format that summarizes this kind of like little info dump, and then it's able to say this. I will also say that AI can be helpful as kind of a lookup tool, to look up kind of standard treatment plans for, help me write a treatment plan for someone who has anxiety with panic attacks and is looking for this type of therapy. And so it can help therapists with a lot of that documentation. I know at least here in the States, there's a lot of really specific required documentation by either insurance providers or different governing agencies. So it can help therapists to maintain compliance with those requirements. And it can also help parse through diagnosis. Now, I would never use AI as the final word for a
Mm.
diagnosis or for a treatment plan, but and maybe to start having basically a differential diagnosis happen in front of you where you could say like here's the symptoms and I could say like here's a possibility and then you can kind of grapple and go back and forth with it. But kind of just like your example with the letter, which wasn't
Yeah.
ultimately didn't seem like a very good letter and it would have been easier, you said, to just do it from scratch.
Yeah.
There are letters that AI has written that I've seen that's like, okay, this is not the final product that I'm going to use, but I want to edit it. Now, I say
Yeah.
all of that as a fellow Luddite who has never used AI for anything and tries to scroll down as soon as I Google something because now Google AI says like, here's a summary, and I'm like, I don't want your lies, because I just feel instantly mistrustful, even
I
though I have
don't trust you.
I don't trust you, even though I don't have a reason to. And I think part of the reason I want to share that too is just to kind of normalize, like, you might be having some of those feelings of mistrust, or you might be feeling like, this is fantastic. I'm going to use AI to plan my trip and hurt my friend's
Mhm.
feelings. Um,
You're so bitter about this.
I was so bitter. I am so bitter, clearly. But I know many, many people who find that it has utility in their everyday lives. That's really what I'm trying to say. So obviously, and all the way across the spectrum of
Mm.
my knee-jerk protectiveness and some people automatically kind of embracing what they see as reducing their workload and their cognitive load. Are there benefits that are on your mind that I didn't speak to?
There's a couple, but actually, I'm really interested in this caveat that anyone listening right now is like, so these two people that don't use AI at all are talking about the risks and benefits of AI. We're experts. We really know what we're talking about.
That's a really good point. We should obviously own that we are not AI or tech experts. I think you already knew that, listeners, but we are not tech experts.
We're very good at listening to people.
We struggle at interfacing with computers.
I think that though, like what we're talking about though about the fears, I think are just universal. Like people are kind of grappling with this kind of new world that we're about to be living in. Professors are, teachers are, students are, everyone is when it comes to news right now. If you go on any social media, it's actually really hard to know what's correct, what's been created by someone using AI, right? Like I love history and right now I have to really grapple with what I'm seeing on history is AI generated or not. And it can be tricky to know when you're not kind of versed in that world. And we're going to have whole generations growing up with that exact thing. Um I grew up with the Dewey Decimal System. Like,
Oh my gosh.
we didn't have internet when I was a kid. So it's like this whole world has really changed. And I think that like recognizing that is important because one of the benefits to kind of go back to your question of AI might be that you have a therapist on your phone. Let's pretend that you and I like don't exist in this scenario. You might have a therapist on your phone. And when I allow myself to just welcome that reality, you can type in as a living journal of something or like have it ask you important questions or say like that really hurt my feelings and then have something like AI technology maybe in your ears be like, you've got this. It's going to be okay. Like, you might actually have this relationship with the technology that might actually boost mental health. It's definitely safer like than like seeing a therapist. It's more immediate than seeing a therapist based on algorithm and like how computers work, it might even be able to ask better questions than I would be able to ask. Like my questions are steeped in months and months with the client. And usually what happens is within that, I can kind of start to suss out like who this client is, what they're struggling with, and ask them a question. Well, AI probably can do that pretty fast. And maybe it's safer than seeing a therapist in the sense that you don't have to look someone in the eye, right? Like you don't have to actually face somebody. You can share some of your deepest, darkest secrets with the absolute knowledge that you won't be judged.
Mm.
So it can, like, I think there's some things that people might really want to gravitate towards in that kind of way. That's what I would say.
There's, I think, also maybe kind of a, safety element in that. Just thinking that a lot of the common tactic that people use to stop doing something they don't want to use anymore, presently, I would say ghosting is one of the most prevalent ways, right? Just going to
Mm,
stop talking to that person or stop going to that thing. And it
mhm.
happens a lot to therapists too.
Oh,
Not all
yeah.
therapists, not all the time, but it's pretty common that if someone needs a break from therapy or doesn't want to have therapy at all anymore, they're just going to stop talking to us.
Hmm.
Um, and now I'm a therapist that kind of like, I'm not going to harass someone, but I will if you don't show up. I'm going to say like, "Hey, what's going on? You okay? You coming next time?"
Yeah.
Which I think is just like kind of a general courtesy thing. But um, I do think it's easier to ghost an AI than a person
Mm.
is going to say like, "Hey, are you coming back?"
Mm. Yeah, because in that sense, AI is more of a tool.
Right. That's a little bit of like a there's less skin in the game, so to speak.
That's a good point.
But that actually kind of leads towards where I've been trying to go this entire conversation, which is what are some concerns or kind of things what we have further questions about with AI? More or less, what are the potential pitfalls?
Mm. I just think that we need to take it seriously, but you're right, there are pitfalls. And I think the interesting thing is, the people who are asking me questions about this generally aren't as scared. They're generally pretty excited. Like I have a lot of clients or friends, acquaintances that are in the tech kind of world. And so they kind of know a lot more than I do about AI. And every single one of them has said it won't take our jobs. So there is something about that. And so I usually want to like kind of ask them why. And one of the things they talk about a lot is that aspect of having the real person in front of them. Yes, a computer can generate all of your history. I really do think it probably will ask better questions. As you pointed out in the beginning of our podcast, it'll probably have a better memory than we do. But that's not why we're in relationship with people. We're not in relationship with people for perfection. We're in relationship with people for the inside jokes, for the kindness, for the kind of long-standing kind of relationship, even partnership that you can kind of pair together and be like, we're in this together. And I think in some ways that connection is a way to test out relating in a space that is kind of a microcosm of the outside world. And when I forget something, it's because I'm real. And conversely, when I remember something, it's because I'm real. When I remember that this is impactful to you because 3 months ago you were really down about something. And this happening now is actually going to impact you in a different kind of way than just maybe on paper it would. The reason I know that is because I'm in a relationship with you. The other thing that I would say, Ryan, that I'm really fascinated with is we've been talking about safety. Even I've been talking about safety. I don't think therapy should be safe. Like, I think it should be holding and it should be a place where you can explore. But I think one of the things about therapy is it takes a lot of guts to go to therapy. You have to go into the depths of things that you probably are trying to not go into on a day-to-day basis. And you're diving into those with somebody who is going to be able to ask pretty deep questions, make connections, bring you to a level of depth that is good for healing, but doesn't always feel nice. And the other thing is that because I'm a real person, instead of just saying this thing to a computer that might be really impactful to you, you have to say it to me. And you can't guarantee what my face is going to do. You can't guarantee, even though I'm a professional, how I'm going to react because I'm still a human. And I've had some of the most profound moments in my practice with clients when they share the unshareable. And I'm able to meet them in such a human form of care and love that's been the breakthrough. That I can say this and I won't be annihilated. Now, you could do that pretty easily with AI, but the risk isn't there. If that makes sense, Ryan?
It does, it really does. And I guess like something that I'm thinking that I often say when I'm training people, or I might say to someone when they're just starting out therapy, is um, therapy is not comfortable. That's usually the caveat I say, like, therapy is not comfortable, and most of the time, we're actually probably going to be uncomfortable if we're
Hmm.
processing through something really meaningful. Um, I do my best to try to make it safe in terms of someone's not being actively harmed, even if they are maybe activated or struggling. But exactly as you said, too, we can't guarantee that. Any situation, it's that microcosm, just like it is in the real world. At any
Yeah.
time, something could begin to be unsafe in a relationship with anyone.
Hmm.
And we are kind of offering a safer place where we can work those things through and where the therapist can meet the client with rupture and repair. Things can be not okay here, like you can hurt me or I can say the wrong thing that makes you feel hurt or neglected or not understood. But because we have this therapeutic relationship, in many cases, we can offer a repair opportunity to where we could be with clients and say, like, hey, I am really hurt by the way you just said that, but I'm still here.
Mm.
Let's talk it through.
I was so excited when you said rupture and repair because I think that's exactly it. Let's use your ghosting example.
Mm,
If you had a client that got hurt by you,
hmm.
if they wanted to ghost, you could always be like, where are you? But if they came back, that's the microcosm at work.
Right.
That I usually ghost people when they've hurt me. You really hurt me. It took a lot to come in today to tell you that.
Hmm. And then we can kind of celebrate them coming back and how courageous that is. And then also talk through about, like, what was it like
Yeah.
to hear me say that? And I guess it takes me back to something I was thinking when you were talking about perfection.
Okay.
Because something that I learned in training for therapy, kind of an old psychodynamic adage, that we will fail the client in the way that they need. So that
Mm.
basically we will recreate the kind of rupture inadvertently that they often would experience in life, but then that in failing them in that way that is unique to what is hurtful and rupturing for them, we can then do a repair that's
Mm.
not an opportunity in most of their life. Because usually, like, if you're in a relationship with someone and they hurt you and you say, go screw yourself, I'm done with you, then it's
It's
often
done.
that's it. I'm not going to go back into that conversation.
Yep.
But as therapists, like that's part of our toolkit is to go back into that conversation. It's like, okay, on last session we ended with I could go fuck myself. And how are you feeling about that now? Like let's talk that through.
It is because everything's grist for the mill. Like
Hmm.
you lashing out like that actually didn't make me feel so hot. I felt kind of on a back foot. I felt scared. I felt like you were going to leave me. I didn't know you were going to come back today. Got scared you wouldn't. Now we're building something different. Now the relationship can actually have something there. And I don't want to say it in kind of a cavalier way, but most relationships we fail somebody one way or the other. We're a bunch of humans. As long as it's not like intentionally cruel, right? Like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about on a day to day. Like we can miss the boat. We can kind of get something wrong. I know for myself sometimes I'm not always going to get it right. And it's that kind of part of being able to have that grittiness, that reality. It is actually, I think, very important to our work. And for some of my clients, they'll also know, and I get that glint in my eye. They're like, Jess, you're judging me. And I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. They're like, what do you want to say that you're not saying, but your eyes are saying? Like, all of that feels very important. And when a client knows you
Absolutely.
well enough, that's also a relationship, isn't it?
Absolutely. No, that's also a relationship. It's a very meaningful relationship. It goes both ways. That we're
Mm,
not just like this like omniscient, supportive person that remembers everything and feeds it back to you in the form of questions.
yeah.
We're actually also not okay.
Yeah.
And we also have these fun and helpful tells like the glint in the eye, or I get a little smirk sometimes with clients and they know they're like, what? Um, and that is again, in many ways, like the relationships people will have with other humans as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Also, good tie back to our podcast name.
Thank you very much. It was almost inadvertent. I was going to say we're a mess, and I was like, that's true, but I'm going to say we're not okay.
Nice.
A couple little reflections that have been rattling around in my brain while we've been talking. I was thinking about kind of the fear of AI. And I think a lot of my fear in terms of therapy specifically,
Hmm.
I never think about whether or not I'll be out of a job from AI.
Oh,
It's
okay.
never been something that I've been worried about. Not because I just think I'm, so unreplaceable or something. Of course I would like to think that, but um it's more that I'm afraid of people not getting good support. I'm afraid of the impact on the client. There are I know that at least in my lifetime, even if AI became like super therapist of the world, there would
Mm,
still be enough people that would choose to see a therapist that I'm like, I don't know. And I'm not that business motivated. It's definitely one of my weak points as a as an adult person is that I'm not that money motivated.
mm.
So I never really think too much when people ask me that particular question. But when I think about will this be safe for clients? Will they get what they need out of it?
Yeah.
That's where I'm thinking about like, is there some danger or risk here? Or is it going to produce the kind of dependency that never ends? That now AI is the only safe person I can talk to because
Wow.
no one else will respond to me always supportive,
Hmm.
right? Because I think it'd be very easy, well, not to diminish what programmers do, but you could. program a therapist AI to always be supportive. You'd say
Mm,
anything you want, and they would always be kind and friendly back. They would never get angry. They would never tell you, "Oh, I'm hurt."
yeah.
So yeah, that kind of rattles around for me. And I think part of that is in fear I carry in other places, kind of this fear of rejection
Mm.
as an individual person with, for example, this has just become my example of the episode, but like, for example, if you're asking me for trip recommendations, I love this.
I will never ask you for trip recommendations now that I know what like a hot topic this is for you.
What it was is it's not even specifically about trip recommendations. It's about that feeling of kind of like rejection.
Mm,
And I do wonder how that could play for people who are in a relationship with an AI and choose within themselves and maybe even to others that like don't want to talk to you about this. I want to talk to my AI about this.
mm.
Like I don't want to be your friend. I want to be the AI's friend because they're a better friend in terms of doing what I want them to do.
Well, there's also that aspect of perfection we were just talking about, right? Like you might miss something, but you're also what AI doesn't have is those experiences. You'll be able to like be like, and this gelato place was oh my gosh, I had the weirdest experience here. Let me tell you about this. So now when
Mm,
I'm going to this place, I'm not just getting the ice cream. I'm bringing Ryan along with me. I'll take a picture of me having that ice cream there, and then you and I are bonding together. And it's just like it's just this aspect of like mutuality.
mm,
I I love that aspect of like bringing our friends alongside us. But what you're saying is that maybe there is going to be a bit more of a choosing of the safe. And so I think for anyone listening, like it is about the grit that makes life worth living. That when we're not safe, we're actually kind of living. And I don't mean safe in terms of like putting ourselves in like anything that's kind of dangerous or unnecessarily bad. What I mean by is it's just taking a risk. And life's full of being able to take risks. When we're in our comfort zone, it's wonderful. It's warm. It's like just yeah, it's lovely. But what does it mean to talk to somebody that can have an expression? What does it mean to talk to someone who might get it wrong? And that we'll strive to get it right. What's it like to talk to someone who gets it right and kind of knows you? Because that can also be scary. And how do we kind of start to navigate that reality of relationships amongst a society that can be quite lonely?
mm. And that just, you said the word mutuality in there.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking about that example of like a gelato shop or something
Yeah,
of where AI can give you that recommendation, right? AI knows the best gelato shop in Porto that has the most reviews or whatever.
sure.
But AI is not going to care that you went.
Mm.
If you want to text me later or next time we hang out, show me a picture of like, look, this is what I got. I went to the place. We're going to be connecting and appreciating one another in kind of a different way than AI would be able to.
And so just to cap this off and thinking about like our relationship with AI and our fears as psychotherapists is it seems like for us, for you and I, we've steeped our careers in the relationship. For us, like we do not do a 4 session, 5, 6 session, you're out. For us, it is about a sustained diving into the depths together,
Hmm.
learning that kind of microcosm of what therapy can do here that we then can go out and explore in the outside world. It was it was done really well here, so now I can kind of go out and maybe have those conversations I might fear or have that kind of confidence or whatever, tolerate conflict. That's all done in relationship. And I think what you're kind of ending this segment on is if we only rely on safety, we forego a certain level of relationship that allows for like accountability or like kind of like touch base or we owe something to somebody because they took the time to give us all these recommendations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I want to be grateful to you and to myself for actually diving into something that we both find uncomfortable,
Hmm.
which is this kind of AI world that we're a little bit less familiar with, and yet is butting right up against what we do and things that we love. Um, and I want to thank our listeners too for kind of going on that journey while we stumble through and, share some of our gut reactions to a new thing.
I would be so curious to hear our listeners' opinions or any follow-up questions you may have. If you've got them, send us a message on Instagram or comment on here. We would be so interested to kind of just get to hear what you respond with when it comes to how we might actually be able to turn to robots or AI technology to be able to start to have a relationship. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, check out our others. And stay tuned for even more episodes coming up.
Follow us and leave a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please tell your friends.
You can also follow us on Instagram too at Your Therapist Is Not Okay. Also, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, send us a DM there. We would love to answer your questions. And a lot of our topics come from listeners just like you.